Hello everyone, welcome to today's session for Business Awareness Revision Session. Today we're going to be covering Task 4, Ethical and Legal Compliance. So a little bit of this, especially to do with ethics and maybe a touch of the money laundering you'd have covered briefly in Level 2. Level 3, Business Awareness, we go into it in a lot more detail, and you can, Task 4 is a written task, so you will be expected to do some written work on this. Okay, so what I've got for you tonight is a task briefing, which we'll go through first of all, just briefly cover the topics that can be tested on, and then I've got a couple of questions that we'll go through at the end together. So as I've already stated, Task 4 deals with ethical and legal compliance. It may also include ethical conflicts, so how you resolve any conflicts, and also reporting unethical behaviour and money laundering. This task is worth 10 marks. Sorry, there's a typo error. That actually equates to 15 minutes for you to be able to answer this question. So we'll go through some of the contents below and terminology, things like that, that you need to be aware of for your exam. We'll start off with, wrong colour, let me just change that. So we'll start off with the ethical conflicts, first of all, and the reporting of the unethical behaviour. So first of all, what are ethics? They are moral principles that kind of are based on the idea of being wrong or right. So how we are going to act as accountants, is that going to be the right way of doing things? Is it going to be the wrong way? Okay, hopefully you'll be avoiding the wrong way. As professional accountants, there are consequences of breaching ethical standards. So we can have some internal consequences, so say within our actual workplace. So here within our employment, we can have consequences such as breaching our contract. We can face internal disciplinary procedures because of breaking those ethical standards. That could be in the form of a formal, a written. So where you actually get disciplined and it's a written notice that's given to you. It could be suspension. It could even be termination. Okay, so depending on what's in your contract and whether it's a serious breach or not, those are the different options that you could face within the employment. We've also got professional negligence. So if you remember back in Level 2, your ethical principles that you would have had to have learned, you had one, professional behaviour. And that's about not bringing the profession into disrepute. Well, if you're breaking those ethical standards, you are bringing the profession into disrepute. Okay, this could then also face disciplinary action, or you could face disciplinary action from the professional accounting bodies. Within your studies, you would have covered when to report and unethical behaviour. So make sure that you're familiar with your exam of when to report a breach, the difference between external whistleblowing, internal whistleblowing, what protection you get if you are whistleblowing, and also where you can seek advice. So as an organisation, there are key ethical values that they would want to adhere to. So one of those being transparent with customers and suppliers. We want to make sure that we treat our customers and suppliers in a fair and honest way. We have to report financial and regulatory information clearly and on time. So if you think of the filing of the accounts to Companies House, You've also got your various different forms of tax returns, making sure that they're filed to the HMRC. We want to make sure that the information submitted is complete, clear, and on time. We need to adhere to those regulations. Organisational ethical values should also include whether or not to accept and give gifts as hospitality. So it should have clear guidance on what can be accepted, maybe the amounts that can be accepted as well. So if somebody's going to come and give you a brand new car as a gift, surely that's too excessive. Maybe they're going to, you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're accepting gifts of that high value and then you might be forced to act unethically in the future, because it could be seen that you're taking some kind of bribe, or you want to always remain objective. Okay, so there will be clear guidance on that. Part of the organisational ethical values as well are making sure that we pay suppliers a fair price and that we pay them on time. So if we're given 30 days credit to be able to pay our suppliers, there's nothing wrong with paying them on day 29 or day 30. As a business, in order for our cash flow, ideally we want to pay them as late as possible. Paying them as late as possible, though, does not mean paying them late. Say that you're a really large organisation, you have a lot of buying power. You don't want to use that advantage and then dictate conditions that are unfair on the supplier. So maybe your supplier has a rule of 30 days that they need their bills to be paid, their invoices to be paid to help their cash flow. If you're a big business, you don't want to be coming along and say, well, I demand 60 days when you can pay them in 30 days, and you know that putting them under pressure to make them to pay in 60 days, or putting them under pressure so that you have extended terms under 60 days could end up having a negative knock-on effect on their business. That's not really fair. So we want to pay a fair price and on time. Want to make sure that we're providing fair treatment, decent wages and good working conditions to our employees. Are we giving them the correct rate, the correct wages that they're entitled to? Are we making sure that the conditions in which they work are safe, that it's good conditions for them? We want to be following those health and safety guidelines as well. In regards to use of social media, whether it's appropriate and fair, again, there should be a policy in place within the workplace that dictates what's acceptable. So what's acceptable to be posted, what's acceptable use, etc. Okay. So that's a little bit about key organisational ethical values that we should be following. So now we're going to move on to money laundering. So hot topic, very likely it will come up in your exam. So please make sure that you are familiar with this. So what is money laundering, first of all? So we've got a definition here. It's the process by which the proceeds of crime and the true ownership of those proceeds are changed so that it appears to have come from an legitimate source. So say that you've gained money through proceeds of crime, you can't go around just buying assets with that, things like that. You need to be able to show where that money has come from. If you all of a sudden you went to the bank, deposited thousands of pounds, it's going to look suspicious. If you're then going to buy a property with that, again, it's going to look suspicious if there's no trail of where that money comes from. Money laundering is when you're trying to make that money appear legitimate, as though it has come from a true business source. Okay. Cash businesses tend to be very common or quite popular way of making that money appear legitimate. If you think, for example, taxi firms, hairdressers, pubs, anywhere where they accept cash, it can be quite difficult to prove what cash has been put in the till from actual real life business transactions and what has been put in the till through a proceed of crime. Okay. There are three distinct kind of stages when somebody is trying to money launder and to hide those original transactions. Again, please make sure that you're familiar with this in terms of and ready for your exam. So the first stage that we've got is placement. So we refer to this as the input. So this is where the criminal proceeds are initially entered into the system to make it look like it's come from that legitimate source. Okay, so again, like I say, you've got a cash business, people have come along and they put money into the till. They're trying to hide that money as part of that cash business, whereas really some of it could be from the cash business, but some of it could be part of criminal proceeds. Second stage that we've got is layering. So this is where we're processing that money. So cash is transferred from business to business, or it can be transferred from one country to another. What we're doing is we're kind of setting up a complex web of transactions. We're making it a lot harder to have that audit trail to find where that money originally came from. So you're concealing the source of the money. So like the aim of layering is to make it difficult to trace that original source of the money. We've then got, for the last stage, integration. So this is when it's been inputted into the business, it's been processed, it's been moved around, shuffled around, difficult to trace. The output is when they can now spend it. So money is withdrawn from the company in form of salaries, dividends. I also mentioned purchase of assets. So buildings, cars, things like that. You're trying to make those earnings and those purchases look legitimate and not related to criminal activities. So those are the three stages to money laundering. Dealing with money laundering, we've also got other offences. Other offences could be tipping off. So if you suspect somebody of money laundering or being involved in money laundering and you tell them that there's possibly going to be an investigation into them, or you're kind of making them aware this looks dodgy, you need to change this, do that. That is part of your tipping off. So it's when you when somebody informs a person or group of people who are or are suspected of being involved in money laundering, and the information that they pass on is likely to reduce their chances of being investigated or producing an actual investigation. So how can you prejudice an investigation? So this can be committed by an accountant or another person who is aware that a money laundering investigation is being carried out or about to be carried out. So what they can do is they can let the other person know, and then they could actually become involved in it by falsifying. Spelled that wrong. Let me just change that. Can't see my pet. There we go. Falsify evidence, maybe withhold evidence that's been requested as part of that investigation, and concealing, so hiding evidence, or even destroying evidence. Okay, so that's a way in which they can prejudice their investigation. As part of money laundering, it is also a crime to fail to disclose any suspicious activity. So if you suspect that there is a case of money laundering occurring, as part of your job, as part of your responsibility, you must report those suspicions. If you work in a larger company that have a money laundering officer, you would write up an internal report, and that would get sent off to the money laundering reporting officer. So there is an obligation to report knowledge of any suspicious activity. It's always worth, if you do suspect, it's always worth reporting it to your money laundering reporting officer, and then they can take it further if they think there's a basis for it. Okay, but at least you've done your part. So it must be reported to the money laundering reporting officer, often referred to as the MLRO, by completing an internal report. The officer then has a duty to consider the internal reports, and if they do consider or suspect that money laundering and terrorist financing is taking place, they will then complete a SAR, an external suspicious activity report, and that must be made to the National Crime Agency. Please make sure that you are familiar with these terminologies as well. Okay, my advice is, if you are going to refer to these in the exam, don't straight away start using MLRO. I would always, first of all, the first time that you refer to it, write out the full title, and then in brackets put the abbreviation for it. If you then, following on from that, use the abbreviation, that's fine. At least somewhere in your answer you've got what the full term actually means. Okay, but please be familiar with those terms ready for your exam. Say that you are a sole practitioner, have a very small practice. Oh, I'm sorry, didn't want that. So if you're a sole practitioner, you may not have a money laundering reporting officer. In that case, you can submit an SAR straight to the National Crime Agency. All SARs must be filed within 30 days of the date of the initial determination for the necessity of filing the report. So once you've determined the fact that, yeah, I think a report should be submitted, they've got 30 days in which to do that. An extension of 30 days can be obtained if the identity of the person conducting the suspicious activity, so the one suspected of doing the money laundering, if their identity is unknown and maybe you're trying to find it out, you can have an extension of 30 days, but at no time should that filing be delayed longer than 60 days. Another thing to note are the penalties for these. So where we've got tipping off, prejudicing the investigation, failure to disclose, they can carry a maximum prison term of 5 years and or a fine. Okay, so quite hefty. Make sure when you're in practice, if you do have any suspicions, that you do disclose them to through the relevant channels. So that's a bit about the task briefing. We're now going to go through some examples, answer some questions together. So we've got 3 questions here, 2 tick box or number and tick box questions, and then we've got a written task. So task 4, in the event of an ethical conflict in the workplace, what would be considered the appropriate order for the course of action? So we've got, would you first of all have a formal internal process or follow the formal internal process, resign, or have an informal discussion with that person. We have to put them in order of 1, 2, 3. So what do we think we would do first of all? So if there was an ethical conflict, excellent. Yeah, I agree with that. First of all, most conflicts can be resolved by going and actually talking to the person. So go have that conversation first of all. If it can't be resolved, what would you then do? What do you think the next option would be? Oh, yeah, again, I agree with that. So follow the formal internal process. Maybe it's lodging a formal complaint, whatever that process is, follow that. If as a last resort it still can't be resolved, the last option is to resign. But obviously we don't want to get to that point. So informal discussion first of all, then follow the internal processes that are already in place, and then resigning is your last option. So that question we've got as worth 2 marks. Part B, we've got AAT members must adhere to ethical standards. Identify which 2 of the following are examples of contravention of loyalty to the profession. And what we mean by contravention is acting against. So acting against. So what shouldn't we be doing? So acting in line with code of ethics, that's what we should be doing. That one's fine. Remember, this one is asking which ones are acting against, or which 2 are acting against. Issue a report which materially misrepresents the facts. Yeah, excellent, Michaela. That is something that's acting against our profession. Okay, we shouldn't, if there's a material, if we are misrepresenting the facts, the users of that information are going to make decisions based on that fact. It could have a big implication on what their final decision is. So we shouldn't be misrepresenting the facts. So that is acting against. Act in line with law and regulation. Again, we should be doing that. That's fine. We're not meant to act against that. Be party to facilitate unethical earnings. So no, shouldn't be doing that. Okay, so B and D, 2 marks for that question. That is what would be acting against. Then we've got an email. You received the email from a new member of staff. Let me see if I could show the whole email. Yep, there we go. So you received the following email from a new member of staff at your accounts practice. So we've got an accountant from another one, date today, subject money laundering. It's saying, hi, hope all is well. I'm a little concerned about one of my new clients. They are a nail technician studio in the town centre. I'm concerned that, so a nail technician, what type of business would you think that is? Do you think people mainly pay on cards, pay by cash? Yeah. So what we're looking for here is that this could be a cash business. And what's raising the concerns is that it's saying, I'm concerned that the turnover looks extremely high. However, I know that they don't have a great reputation. They never seem that busy. So where is this money coming from? Please, could you provide some advice on the following? First of all, a brief explanation of the term money laundering, and also an explanation of the 3 steps involved in money laundering. So we're going to start off. I like to use headings just because then think of the examiner's point of view. They're going to have loads of these papers that they're going to have to mark. You want to make it as easy as you can for them to give you those marks. So make sure your answers are brief and to the point. It's even asking here for a brief explanation. It's worth 2 marks. As long as you make sure that you've covered 2 points, you should be fine with that. You want to make sure that it's clearly laid out, that it's presented well, and it just makes it easier for them to follow. So make sure that you write it in a logical fashion. You wouldn't want to be answering the second part of the question before you've answered the first part of the question. So just take it in order as you go down. So I'm going to just write bullet points on my kind of response, but please remember in your exam, writing full sentences. My bullet points are just going to be what kind of points that you're looking for. So I would start this off as money laundering. And we did cover what this money laundering meant. So it's the concealment. Oh, sorry about that. It's when we're concealing the original origins of money. Okay, so we're concealing whether it's part of a genuine business income or whether it's part of the criminal proceeds. Okay, so typically that can mean, so that would give us 1 point, put that in a full sentence. Another point could be describing how that's done, just as a brief thing. So typically it involves a legitimate business that you're using to make cash look legal. Okay, so as long as you're something along the lines of that, that is your 2 marks. So that's the first part done, your brief explanation. Second part, it's asking for the 3 steps involved in money laundering. So can anybody tell me, if you can remember, what is the first step? Excellent. Yeah, well done. We've got placement. So again, I would put it as a full sentence. So where you say here, an explanation of the 3 steps involved in money laundering, have a brief introduction into it. Say the 3 steps involved in money laundering are as follows. Okay, make sure you've got that. So if I just pop that in here, 3 steps involved in money laundering are as follows. No, you wouldn't gain a mark for that sentence, but you're making it clear for that examiner to find the information that they require. So we've got placement. This is where we're using the illegal money, sometimes referred to as dirty money, is placed into a legitimate business. Just checking I've spelled legitimate right. Yep, I hope I have. So it's placed into a legitimate business. Okay, so after they've got hold of the funds, what they're going to do is put that cash into the business and disguise it. So it's done to disguise so just like above, disguise the origins of that money to make it look like it's come from that legitimate source. Legitimate source. Okay, so this part, this written task, I think altogether is worth 6 marks because we've done 2 on the other 10. Yeah, 6 marks. So I would probably say it's 2 marks for that. Then you've got 4 marks for below. So as long as you've made them clear, like that one for placement could get 2 marks in itself. You've explained that it's the dirty money placed into the legitimate source to make it look like that it's come from that business. Okay. What have we got for the placement? What is step 2? Excellent, well done. Layering. Let me just do this in a different colour, just so we can make it clear which steps we're doing. So now we've got layering. And this is where you've got that complex web, where there's lots of transactions occurring between business to business. So maybe going through different businesses. We also said maybe overseas. So we've got that, like I said, that complex web. So the purpose of that is to make it difficult to find the original source. So we are, the more complex it is, so the complexity of it makes it difficult to source the original source. When you think of your audit trails, okay, it's difficult to have that audit trail and to follow it. Last point then, what have we got for the last point? Let me just change my pen. Excellent, well done, thank you. So yeah, for the last one, we then got integration. So this is where the criminal and the money come back together. So now they meet back up together, come back together. The illegal cash is now absorbed into the economy. This can be through acquisitions. Remember I said they can buy items, non-current assets with it. It could be through dividends. So now say the owner of that business pays themselves a large dividend, they've got kosher money to then go buy things that they want to. It's not going to look as suspicious as if 50,000 just appeared in their bank and then they want to spend 50,000. People are going to be like, well, where did that 50,000 come from? Whereas now it's gone through all through the layering, it's gone through that complex web. He's in his business, he's paid himself a dividend, or paid, say himself, themselves a dividend with that money. It now looks like legal money to go and buy items with, spend as they wish. So dividends, or they can pay it to themselves in form of salaries. Okay. So that is it for task 4. Thank you all for watching this and for attending. I will stop the recording for that now.